Hey everyone, Ponyo here. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of After Dinner Mints. I highly encourage everyone watching to join us in the Art Blocks Discord. A link to our Discord can be found in the description of this video. As always, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode of our weekly show. And now, let's introduce our guest for this afternoon. We have generative artist Phillip Bell.
Hey everyone, I'm Philip. I recently released Staccato on Art Blocks, and I'm happy to be here talking with Ponyo to tell you a little bit about my background and history with artwork and creating.
Awesome. Well, Philip, I'm so glad to have you here today on After Dinner Mints. We have a lot to cover. It's like you said, talking about your just recently published project on Art Blocks called Staccato. But yeah, let's go ahead and start from the top and tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So art has always been a part of my life. My mom is an artist, and so I've grown up around lots of different like creative tools, and I'm really thankful for it, and like creative books. When I was like really little, like around like 4 or 5, she was in grad school at Cranbrook, which is like a really like highly conceptual school, and I would visit her at her studio with her like studio mates and see these things they were creating, and some of them were sculptors and some of them were printmakers, but I would see these like really crazy forms. Like there was a table with a bunch of like forks stuck underneath it, and like just like this really strange stuff. So as a kid, and it like smelled really crazy, like ink and like wax. Like they used all these different mediums, and it was just really amazing being in there as a kid. And it kind of just like stuck with me, because anytime I go into a studio now, I can like smell the different materials that are being used. And even today, like with paper stocks and stuff, or like a book, I'll like smell it, and like I just like love trying to. I don't even know exactly what the ink is with some of this stuff, but I just like love the different materials.
That's awesome. And so it sounds like, family is a huge inspiration, growing up with regards to art. Were there any, other artists, maybe in the traditional art world, or maybe some artists that you kind of saw in museums growing up that kind of influenced you and inspired you early on?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think the first artist that I remember inspired by was from a T-shirt that my mom bought me, and it was a Keith Haring T-shirt, and it was all of his like little like guys coming out of each other's heads, like a Russian doll getting smaller and smaller. And I was like totally blown away by it immediately and wondering what it was. And she showed me some more of Keith Haring's artwork, and it was all the same stuff. It was like the same character, and but just like formed in different ways. And I remember wondering about like what type of art is this? Like, is this art? Like, because I kind of thought that art was this like different type of thing that was like super conceptual, but these were just like symbols, it seemed, that reminded me of like the walking signs in the street and stuff that you just like see around every day. And so she explained this concept of like a visual vocabulary. And that process of creation stuck with me as well. So Keith Haring was definitely one of the first, because I could also reproduce it and like draw it myself. And that was really exciting.
Would you say that it was just it made it easier because it was kind of easy to digest and replicate it yourself? Do you think that made it I don't know. Do you think that you're able to connect with it a little bit more that way?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I love art like that, that the stuff that just is so simple that anybody can connect with. I absolutely love stuff like that.
Great. And we're in the NFT crypto space. I'm always curious to know from the artist perspective, how did you get into this space? How did you learn about art blocks?
Yeah. Um, with NFTs and art blocks, that was originally Aaron Penne's Apparitions project. I can't remember where I first saw an image of it, but I really liked it. It was like these simple forms. that were repeated on this like shape on the background. And I really like just the simplicity and elegance of it. And I realized that it was part of a greater series, and that led me to art blocks. And with this, I learned about this concept of editions of mints and how artists and art blocks were using blockchain technology to specify these hashes for generative art projects. And it seemed like just a perfect blend of the two forms in a way to really make something special. And so ever since I saw that, I wanted to be involved.
And when you first saw Aaron's project and kind of dug in a little bit more, did it make sense right away that you wanted to launch a project on art blocks or just on the blockchain, or did it kind of take you a little bit of time to do a bit of research and go from there?
I knew I wanted to do art blocks because I was looking around at alternatives, and nobody else at that time were doing anything quite like that. But there was Hic et Nunc, and that was really fun to experiment with, because I had just like a backlog of a bunch of stuff that was on other social media like platforms, and I didn't really know what I would do with it other than just like putting it out there to get likes and just share stuff. So I started posting some of that artwork on Hic et Nunc, and that was received really well and really exciting, and definitely helped me want to do more like NFT work, because I realized like, wow, I can really connect with people with this, and my artwork can like sell, and that was really exciting.
And how did you go about, you're talking about Hic et Nunc, how did you go about selecting that very first piece that you wanted to put on the blockchain? Was that something where you knew the exact piece you wanted to do, or was it kind of just like, I'll just kind of tinkering around, I'll just put whatever's up there?
Well, actually, it wasn't Hic et Nunc at first. It was Foundation, and one of my friends wanted to try it out, and so I put something on there, and like it just didn't sell, and it was super emotional, and I like didn't know what to do because I wasn't like promoting, and I didn't have any Twitter following at that time. It was like only Instagram, and apparently nobody's on Instagram really that's in the blockchain like crypto space. So that was kind of like hard to promote it, I think. So that was really emotional, but my friend actually did like end up buying it, and that was cool.
Nice. That's awesome. Well, speaking, of those early pieces, maybe you can share with us, a couple of those early generative art pieces that you created.
Yeah, definitely. We'll go to like, this is like way back. This is college. This is the first iteration of a personal portfolio website. And I basically so this is the home screen. And there's this composition of these like splatters and paint marks with like brushes. So you can kind of see this like longer line comes in a little bit differently, and there's like the splatters are a little bit of a different configuration. So anytime you refresh the page, it would be this different composition. So I had some ink and like these brushes, and I made these like splatter paint like images and scanned them, and then loaded them into this Flash program with action scripts that I totally hacked together from one of Joshua Davis's, and he goes by PrayStation on Twitter, but
Yeah.
he was like a really like going back to like early inspirations, like he in terms of like generative art and like designers using code, like he was like a major early inspiration, and there were a couple of others too, but he had some tutorials online, so I was checking those out, and using one of those, I put together this like very simple program for this like generative art intro thing. And then I even had this concept of additions back then. I didn't even like, I'm just noticing this again now, but I had like this random number, and then it says out of infinity, because it's like anytime you reload it, it'll just be something new. But it kind of like brought in my printmaking like edition concept into it back then.
And how did you feel, obviously going to art blocks, you set an edition size and then whatever's created is basically on the blockchain. You're not like, obviously curating exactly what pieces are, staying on the blockchain. Like, what was your thought going into it? Were you nervous or scared, or did that make you have work harder, or how did that go about?
I was absolutely terrified. Like mint zero. Oh my gosh, I was praying like for this to be something that I like. But the thing was, at that point, I really liked the script. I had it really worked into something that I felt like was specific, but had enough variation, and I really liked everything coming out of it. So I felt really good going into it, but definitely nervous. But I'm really thankful that this first mint of it, and I can show it real quick.
Yeah, please.
But the first mint of Staccato, let me see, where is it here? Yeah, so this is mint zero. And this one, I'm just so happy with it because I feel like it's just a really beautiful, like there's a concept of baseline mints, and it's like how the program will express itself, like at kind of like when, like just an even mix of the features and variables. So I just really liked that it's just a really nice baseline mint. Super happy with it. But to go a little more into your question too about like this concept of edition size, I think it's really cool because it makes you think about what it makes you think about the parameters of a script and what the script, how many iterations would be a good amount to have the system fully express itself. And I feel like 200 was perfect for Staccato. Like there's a really great mix of different variations and some outliers that are really exciting too. So I'm really happy with that, and I think it's a really great way to think about generative art, to have like this specific amount
Definitely.
of mints.
Yeah, let's jump into talking about Staccato. What can you tell us about this project?
Yeah. So printmaking I've mentioned it a few times before, but process just in general is a really big deal for me because even before learning how to code, iteration is something that really felt good as a creative process. And when I kind of relinquish all creative control and just learn about a method, there's like no pressure. And I really like that type of creating. And printmaking always had that feel because it was about figuring out this machine and figuring out the pieces and figuring out the different ways to put them together. And I found that I really liked to find ways that I could let the process express itself. So with letterpress, I didn't want to, like, letterpresses were used kind of back in the day to prototype layouts or like layouts for newspapers. So it'd be like all these little tiny text pieces that are in there and like images. And it's super meticulous. Or it would be for making like big posters with like these big wooden text pieces. But there's also these like decorative pieces and like little thin lines and stuff and like little shapes. And I had a bunch of that stuff in the studio, so I decided to just put all of that into the letterpress and print it and see what it looked like. And I can share my screen and show some of this background stuff too.
Yeah, please do. I'd love to learn, a little bit more about your background as a printmaker also.
Yeah, absolutely. So in college, and I can get into that real quick for just like a few sentences. Like, my mom's a printmaker, so like that stuff was around. But then also in college, what I first went into after like the first year of fine arts or like fine arts foundations was printmaking. And like foundations, was really about like expressing something, like drawing the figure and making it look like a figure. And that was like, it didn't come naturally to me. And I didn't really want to put in the effort to like get really good at it because I just didn't really enjoy it. And so I was really into like geometric abstraction, and I was really into like method. And so that led me to kind of printmaking and then also graphic design. So while I was in school, I like flipped majors twice trying to figure out what was like the perfect blend. And I think what really led me to graphic design too was that underlying the layouts and the principles is geometric abstraction. Like I really like the grid itself and the blocks and forms on it, like even more than the content of the forms. And like looking back now, like years after college, I realized like I wanted to learn about geometric abstraction, and now like I'm able to blend that into Staccato and my generative art and programming experience. So that's an exciting mix that's just kind of formed now.
Very cool. That's awesome.
And then to get back to printmaking and how it influenced Staccato. Printmaking, like the studios have, like I think that the materials are really, really beautiful. Like this is a case of these wooden strips that are used to separate the different like lines of text. And they're organized in these wonderful ratios. It almost looks like a piano. And there's this underlying system of them, and it's very organized, but each one of these has a history. Like you can see there's some bent pieces in here. Not all of them are exactly the same length because they're cut by hand. So it's really systematic, but super organic. And since all of this stuff is antique, it's all been really used and worn. But like I love that blend of organization and entropy, and that's a big foundation of generative art too, is like this balance of chaos and organization. And that's something that I find in a lot of like the old printmaking methods.
And
So that's, mhm.
I was just gonna ask, do you still use a letterpress today? Like, is that something you still tinker around with, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, any chance I can get to print, I am happy to. The studios, like the studio that I use, that's my mom's studio, is in North Carolina. So when I'm currently in Chicago, but whenever I'm able to go back, I love to print there. And I'm looking for studios in Chicago, and I've pretty much I've moved here pretty recently, so I'm still kind of like learning the area, but hopefully I can find some studios here to print in as well.
Cool. I'm glad that, you're able to kind of continue on. Obviously it's super cool to kind of see you doing stuff on the blockchain, but I always find it important or I don't know, I find it interesting that artists, are still, not letting go of some of those older traditions that they've kind of worked on earlier in their career.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's really important for anybody making creative stuff to just anything that they're interested in to just explore it and just see where it takes them. Because I didn't even totally realize it when I was making Staccato, but so much of the restraints and like even the features in it are based off of it. So I think it's really, really great practice for any artist, like no matter what medium, to just try different stuff.
Absolutely. And maybe we can kind of take it back for a second.
Yeah,
Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the meaning of the project name Staccato.
yeah. So staccato is a term in music that means to perform with notes like sharply detached from each other. And with staccato, there is this high contrast of positive and negative space. And our eye is only able to recognize foreground or background only like one at a time. Like we can't see them simultaneously. So in staccato, we can see these shapes at first, like depending on whether it's light or dark. Like we see the dark shapes at first, but as the eye moves through it, we see the positive forms come out from the negative space. And there's this detachment between the two that our eyes kind of flip between. And I feel like that concept really matched it. I really like the sound of Staccato too. It sounds really high contrast. So as soon as I kind of thought, and I don't even know how I thought of the word exactly, but I was maybe like reading something and then I just kept thinking about it and I was like, wow, that's just perfect. It just clicked.
That's got to be always a great feeling. And is that something I'm assuming most artists, select a name at the end of a project, or was that something you kind of, found out or picked like midway through the project?
Yeah, it was totally random, but kind of near the end. It didn't have a name for a long time. Like I was thinking about naming it something that I was calling my letterpress experiments, but it's not totally my letterpress experiments. It's separate. So I wanted to do something different. So yeah, it was near the end of the project where it was kind of like coming down to the line, and I was just really thankful that it popped into my head.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe you can tell us also a little bit about, the process of, selecting shapes for this project, Staccato.
Yeah. So let's see. I think I have an early version of the script with like sliders in it that we can check out. Okay, cool. So it's not the final script, but it's pretty close to it. It's just the one that has the sliders in it. So I have it here to show.
Whoa, that's super trippy when you
Right?
kind of
Yeah.
like slide back and forth. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy to be able to. Yeah, so I put these sliders in the project to see how the different ranges, like what the maximums were looking like, and just making sure I like it and being able to prototype a little quicker. So this is pretty close to not having any warping across the grid. So we can kind of see what the shapes look like at this baseline and the sequence of them. And so the shapes change based on X or Y axis. And this one is using the Y axis to move through the different shapes. And we can see that this one's there's some instances of the triangles in this one, but it's mainly using the circles. And it's cycling through the rotation based on like stepping through the Y grid. And then it also changes based on a noise field. So it's using Perlin noise to decide whether it should use this kind of like cut out circle. And that's also how it's deciding the triangles as well. But so as it warps to, though, it's trying to figure out like the original position that the shape was in to calculate the shape, and it's using a noise field as well. So it's kind of a blend of the offset of the shape within the grid, the X offset, and the Y position, and a noise field to add a feeling of randomness that has like some cohesion to it. That
That's
might have
awesome.
sounded
And
super confusing.
no,
But
no, that makes sense. I'm also curious also, some of those pieces in your project have really large shapes. And so what kind of determines, the sizing of the shapes? Yeah, exactly. When you're kind of looks like when you're sliding through it, increase the size. Is there a specific part of the seed that kind of, decides what the shape is for this project?
sorry, what was that?
So I'm curious, when you're sliding through and it's showing the larger shapes, what actually determines the sizing for a given piece?
Mm-hmm. Well, there is a parameter that is like the amount of cells, which is this one. But then there's also like there can be a lot of cells, and then there can be large pieces, and that's based on the warping of the grid.
Got it. Okay. And and also, so I know I noticed that some of the pieces in the project also have a little bit of color. I'm curious to know what the process was for you selecting color palettes.
Yeah. Color was actually not something that was originally going to be in the project because I wanted the super high contrast feeling to be like the main focus of it. So, but when I found this color palette and figured out a way to use it that was really influenced by the way the shapes are changing. So it created, and we can maybe look at one too. Yeah, we can look at this one. So it's using a similar algorithm to decide like the shape and the color. So it creates like a smaller subdivision. So it still has a high impact of positive and negative space. And this one like especially has a ton of negative space. And so also the color palette has a range, like it moves kind of through the chromatic range, kind of like a rainbow. So I felt like there was some evenness to it that matched the feeling of the project.
So what percentage of pieces in the project actually have, some of these colors like the green, yellow, oranges?
Yeah, I think like it's funny as the creator to not remember the exact number, but I think it's 10%. It's a
10%.
small
Okay.
amount.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
and I did it because I wanted the high contrast and high impact of the shapes is really like the core piece of the project. So I really like the colored outputs a lot, and I still think that they do give that effect. But I wanted to keep it low because the I thought that the combinations of shapes when it's monochromatic have a much more exciting or much higher ability to like see the texture overall. Um, so I kind of did it out of priorities of what the project is designed to communicate.
Got it. And also one thing I noticed, when pulling up some of these mints is that it actually live renders, when you open up the project in the live mode. And I'm curious, was that something that, you've always thought about like from the beginning of this project, or is that kind of a late addition? Or tell me about the thought process behind that.
Yeah. Um, it was a late addition. It's sort of like the color. And I added it because I really liked the way that it gave some emphasis to each shape that is creating the composition. Um, the experience of Staccato is really designed to be static and to look at it when it's fully rendered. But after it renders in, like you have that experience and you can sit with it. So I liked that the kind of reveal or animate in was a nice way to emphasize each one of the small shapes. But then also it like comes to a resting point where we can see the piece
Mhm.
as a whole.
And so we were talking a little bit earlier about, uh, every mint that's created on the blockchain is there permanently. How do you know when? How did you know for Staccato actually when that project was complete, that it was ready, to be submitted, and that it was ready? You knew that whatever was going to come through, the minter, hopefully, was going to be something that you'd be proud of.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that a big part of designing a generative project is having a very clear scope of the algorithm and what you're trying to express with it. And I think that if that's really clear, the project can be done from like a very early stage. And after that, like things can be decided like texture depending on like what type of metaphor you're trying to make with the piece. Like with this, it's printmaking, and like that's why there's this texture on it. Um, but I think as long as the algorithm is really tightly scoped for what you want to express, it could be done at any moment. Like Staccato, even in some of the first images that I shared on Twitter, I could have like probably tied it up and released it, but what I needed to take it to the finish was to just make sure that the ranges of the parameters were within what I wanted to express with it. So being clear conceptually about what you're trying to express, and then being really tight with what the algorithm is doing. And I think if that's really clear, then it can be ready whenever like the platform or wherever you're ready to release it is ready.
Got it. And then with your background as a printmaker, working with the letterpress, and then, releasing this project, and it is done digitally, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on, the best way to display this project.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really cool part of digital art is display, because there's all of these different screens that we can show them on, and all of these different ways to experience it, like even projection. And so that's something that I'm still like conceptually wrapping my head around, is like, how do we make, as digital creators, like, how do we approach this stuff? Because there's aspects in the rendering of Staccato that are dependent on the resolution of the screen, and there's certain things that are fixed, and like figuring out that balance, I think, is a really interesting part of designing digital projects. But Staccato, I think it's really like just the experience of looking at it. But as a medium, I do want to print them. I want to print all of them, and I want to look at all of them, like just for me. But then I would really love to distribute them to all the collectors that are holding them. And I want to find a space where I can show them all and have something that like everybody can come check them out. So I really want to do prints and have an experience like that. And I think that would be like the way I really imagine it is like very giant prints. And I don't know exactly how I'm going to do that, but I want to figure it out.
That's awesome. Well, if anyone's listening and you're in the Chicago area and you have a gallery space or, museum, anything, then, reach out to Phillip. I'm sure. I think that would be awesome. I think that's always the best way to kind of showcase generative art, is to have, multiple outputs, like you said, just massive. And then that's just the best way to, I think, to educate and explain to people, hey, these are all from the exact same project, but they're generating different pieces. It's just all of them are one of one of X, all completely unique. So
Yeah.
that's exciting. So you are exploring prints, or would you use a letterpress for this then? Or I know that would be incredibly difficult.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like, yeah, just it wouldn't be feasible actually for the technology. Like,
Yeah.
because like each piece of letterpress like lead has to be made custom. But for something like this, I would probably do digital prints, because it needs to be, yeah, I think that's like a limitation of, or it could be screen printed, but then with that you have to do a run. Like I would need to do multiples of each to make that really like to justify it. But I think like digital printing is coming like a really long way, and it's just like can make some really beautiful reproductions. So yeah, I'm reaching out to some printers to understand like what the capabilities are and like what we could do.
That's super cool. Well, yeah, you'll definitely have to, share it on the Discord and, your Twitter page, I'm sure. I know a lot of the collectors would be super excited to know that, prints in some capacity are going to be available to the public. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some collectors have been asking me about it too, and I'm definitely like working on it and thinking about it.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about some of your favorite mints from this project, or any of the mints that kind of surprised you.
Yeah, definitely. Like it was super nerve-wracking going into it, because I was just hoping that like a really good set of work would come out. And I am like very, very happy with it. I think there's a really great range of like low density and high density and colored mints. But a few that really surprised me was the second mint. Like I wasn't able to like watch the live minting, so I didn't see this happen. But Sarah pinged me on Discord and was like, the second mint is out. It looks really great. And I was like, oh, cool. I'll check it out later. But then I saw a picture of it and I was like, whoa, like, and I didn't know how I felt about it at first. And I was checking out Discord after I got out of it, after I was able to like catch up with things. And people were loving it. And I was really happy about that. But when I was like adding the color palette, I kind of wanted all of the colors in at once. And so this one surprised me a lot. Um, but I really like it. It's really warm and like very, very like just like kind and gentle, but like it still has these areas of like high contrast and like rich color. So I like it a lot, but it was very surprising. Um, I really like this one a lot personally. I think that the positive and negative space and how these shapes are like hugging each other is really special. Um, and I really love this form, how it has this very round shape and then very sharp balance here. And I was just like, I think I really like this one too. This one we looked at a little bit before too, number 7. It has this beautiful like negative space here, and a major theme of this project is like capturing space, and I really love how you can make like a very small amount of marks to like capture a space, and this one I feel like achieves it in a really nice way.
Yeah, what I really love about number 7 is actually those two pieces, those kind of that green and yellow at the bottom kind of frames that negative space in that middle and kind of just
Mhm.
yeah, it's just executed really well. It's an awesome one.
Yeah, it's crazy how like you mentioned executed, and it's cool how like a script it's doing its own thing, and like it executed this, and that's
Yeah.
really cool because like I would not have designed this. And I love that part of generative art because like you design a system, but like you don't design the actual artwork that comes out of it. And I love that the system itself executed this.
Definitely.
And then 194 is really wild that this came out because I saw something like this when I was like hitting refresh like thousands of times and like generating pages of thousands of iterations to look at them. I saw stuff like this and I was like, wow, some of them look kind of like an A, but this one's literally an A. And I love that
Oh
this
yeah. I see
like
that.
yeah, it's a lowercase a like with the
Mhm.
top and then the tail. And yeah, I don't know exactly like how things lined up for this to happen, but I'm very, very excited about it. It's just really cool that this is part of the official set.
I can also see a profile view of a face and then kind of like a ponytail, if you
Mm.
see that, or like a
Yeah.
fish with like the circle and it has the fins, and then maybe like these two things kind of on top. That's a really cool piece because you can kind of look at it in so many different ways. Like you said, the letter A, I love that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, some of them like the way the forms come together can look like different things too, and that's really fun about these like projects that are really abstract. Like you can see things in them like clouds, and there's definitely a lot of moments of that in Staccato.
That's great.
And then yeah, I mean this one is more like baseline, but still I just love the density of it, and I love the different positive and negative forms in it. And yeah, I mean after Staccato came out, I was just scrolling through the mints, and I love all of them. I'm super
That's
happy with
great.
it.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you, talking about your project Staccato, which was released on Art Blocks, just a few weeks ago. Do you have any future projects kind of in the pipeline that you're working on right now, or is this, are you more focused on, closing this up, maybe spending more time just kind of digesting this project in its fullest form?
I'm really trying to be like being kind of compulsively creative is a lifestyle that I'm just trying to keep always. And so I'm always trying to experiment and make stuff. There are a few algorithms right now that I discovered that I'm playing with, and they're highly based on this concept of positive and negative space. Like when I'm working on projects, I want the stuff that I release to be things that are not, they don't have anything to do with trend. I want them to be things that people can look at in 100 years and still have the same experience and not have to have any context about exactly what was going on. But then also I'm reading a lot more. I'm getting more interested in art history and in the history of geometric abstraction. There are a few artists that I'm familiar with that a lot of people are familiar, like some people, whenever they see geometric art, they might compare it to Victor Viscerali, I think is how they call his name. And he did so much work, and it's like true, he like really crushed it. But was a lot of other things going on at that time that influenced it, and other artists that he influenced, and even artists that were a part of that movement that just like were going in totally other tangents. So I'm trying to understand the context of those artists and why they created what they did, to try to understand like what I'm doing as I develop as an artist, and like how I can contribute to that line of thought and process that's kind of like beyond me. So I'm I'm exploring some algorithms that have this concept of high contrast that I can work with. And then simultaneously researching art history and geometric abstraction to kind of see where what I'm doing is fitting and how I'm going to carry this forward into the future.
That's awesome. And, is that going to continue on? Is that going to include, letterpress printmaking also?
It's letterpress printmaking, I think, is always going to have a part of it in my work. But also like risograph printing, I love silkscreen. Just methods in general are going to be a part of my work, I think, forever. Like cut paper is something that I've also done a lot of work with. Like I did like children's pop-up books. I also did a bunch of like experimentation with like creating these like paper sculptures. And so that could work into it. I think all of this stuff is going to flow together. And anytime I release something, I want to be sure to include any type of background like that I have in like physical pieces.
Cool. It's awesome that you're kind of dabbling in, multiple different and things, but where do you go to get that inspiration? Do you go spend time in nature, or do you do research online, or where do you get that inspiration to kind of keep you going?
I mean, I feel very fortunate that I can just like stare at things, and like I don't feel like I ever really get bored. Like I was walking around yesterday and there was like a flyer on the ground that was like stepped on, and the concrete like rubbed away the ink in this way that it was like a really beautiful texture. And like I just sat there for a while and like was just with it. And
That's awesome.
like, yeah, it was great. And so there's moments like that are pretty frequent when I like have time, and I want to have more time for that. But like I also really love what people are doing in the generative art world. Like it's like Wiliam Mapan is like one of my favorite artists right now. Like seeing his work is just like mind blowing. And so it's really cool. And like Matt, I remember seeing his work like years ago. I think Color Wander was one of his projects that I saw, and I was like, I really want to learn how to code. Like it's amazing what artists are doing with this. So those like it's incredible what people are doing in generative art right now. But I love going to contemporary art museums. I love discovering like there's just so much art that I haven't seen yet, and I really want to see all that stuff. But also looking at my old work too is inspiring too, and that's kind of a weird thing to say, but like I have a really big backlog of printed stuff that has all of these different ideas in it as well. So there's a lot.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, I appreciate you sharing all that. I listened to your pre-drop talk the other week, and I really, really enjoyed you talking to Patrick. It's always just great to kind of hear from an artist before they release a project. But one thing that kind of caught my eye, or one thing that I heard, which I need to talk to you about, is you said that you're trained tailor to make suits.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah. When I was in New York, I lived in New York City for 6 years, and I got like really into the clothes. Like it was super exciting to see the outfits. And I worked at an agency, and everybody was wearing like this like really amazing stuff, and I really wanted it, but I could not afford it at the time. But a lot of it was like patches and kind of modifications of clothes. And so I learned how to sew, and I took like a suit making class because I wanted to get like just higher skills and like be better at it. And so yeah, I know how to make a suit.
That's awesome. Well, we have an artist, Rev Dan Cat. He's done an inner liner of like generative art from one of his project releases. Is that something that interests you, or kind of creating into more physical goods, physical manufacturing of, generative pieces. Is that,
Oh yeah, that
yeah.
would be
What are your
awesome.
thoughts?
Yeah, that would be amazing. Like there's like digital weaving equipment, and I would really love to learn how those work to see how I could make just use them with generative art. Like even like Nike and Adidas have these shoes that are knit, and they must use like some digital looms to knit them. And I feel like that type of thing could be used to create like generative patterns. And it looks like, since it's knit, it must be like some one-off because it's like knit one by one. So I would love to learn more about that technology and try to see what could be done with that.
Definitely. Yeah. I think exploring that, I mean, there's just so many untapped parts of, the generative world that hasn't, we haven't seen yet. And I think we're just literally just scraping the surface right now. So yeah, it's cool to kind of, see that you have like a little bit of knowledge and you've kind of worked on suits, and, how can we take stuff from the, physical world and mesh it with, the generative stuff that everyone's creating like yourself. So that's very cool to hear.
Yeah, there's so many opportunities out there. I really want to get more into like the physical world, and like I got a little Arduino kit, so I'm trying to teach myself some of that stuff, and hopefully be able to like hack some physical things and try out some stuff.
Cool. Well, moving on, I appreciate you talking about Staccato. It's such a fantastic drop, and congratulations on selling that out as your first release, and obviously looking forward to another release on the platform. But I'm curious to know, are there any techniques that you're hoping to learn and use in future projects, and if so, which ones are they?
Yeah, I one thing that I love about code and engineering is that there's just so much to learn, and it's all free. It's out there. Like I can find resources to learn it. Um, because like I was saying, I'm kind of like a compulsive like tinkerer with different methods, and like even with like suit making and like it's called paper engineering when you like fold paper and make like sculptures. But even stuff like that. But like with code, I love how many things there are to learn with it. And I don't have to like buy anything for it. It's just like online and I can check it out. And there's no like physical materials, so there's no waste. I love that. So I want to learn like as much as possible so that when I have an idea, I can execute it or have like a awareness of something so I can learn more about it. I don't have a specific algorithm in mind necessarily, but I a big one of the main things that I'm figuring out is trying out different creative processes to make generative art. Like something that I've started doing recently is when I have like a basic thing working, I'll print it out and then I'll draw on top of it. And I'll print like 10 and I'll like just see where my mind takes me and just like try different stuff and see like what that might be or how that could be added to the project or to the algorithm. So I'm trying different ways to approach art making with the computer that introduces like the hand more.
Awesome. We've obviously seen a huge wave of, people being interested in generative art, and in turn, people are interested in becoming artists themselves, or at least exploring. And I'm curious to know if you have any resources or advice for people that might be interested in learning how to code a project.
Yeah. Um, I think that one of the most important things for me to learn rapidly and to gain skills were to find simple examples that I could try to reproduce. And through reproducing projects, I could get into the artist's mind, I felt like, and understand more about them. And it was even something that we did in college, like in painting classes, we would like pick a painting and reproduce it. And that was incredible because I learned so much about, like I did Monet, and I learned so much about color from like trying to mix just the colors and like about how they express light. And so even with generative art, I mean, as long as it's like not something that's super complex and difficult to reproduce, but like maybe some of like the early pioneers like Vera Molnar, like looking at her work and finding some of those pieces and recreating them, I think that's a really great way to look at the history of the craft and understand it a bit more, and then try out some of those algorithms.
Awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. And I find that, mental health is so important in this space when things travel, a mile in a minute. And, how do you, once you like wind down a project or you finish something, or maybe a project, or maybe you're in the process of coding a project, what do you do to kind of get yourself in that, I don't know, like that state of mind where you're just like focused or maybe just like detaching away from everything in this space? What do you do to kind of make that happen?
Yeah, this is an interesting time in like my artistic career, because like this is the first time, like I've been making art and it's always been a part of my life, but this is the first time that I've found a way to share it and connect with people. And I'm so excited by it. And so I'm trying to be really careful about like about burnout. Like I don't want that to happen, but I'm also just so excited to talk with you. And like this Saturday, October 1st, I'm going to be on a panel with some other generative artists, and I am super excited to have an opportunity to talk about my work and like get to know other artists. So that's a balance that I'm going to have to figure out. I don't really have any advice right now, but I'm trying to just be aware of it. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm really
Yeah.
excited to like connect with people. So I'm just going to see where it goes right now. And when I have advice to give for that, I'm definitely going to write it down.
Sounds great. Yeah, I mean, I think as long as people are just conscious of it, this, like I said, this space is just, it can get really crazy at times, but yeah, I really appreciate you talking about that. And then lastly, how can people reach you? Should they have any questions? Do you have a website, maybe some social media plugs you want to let collectors and viewers know about?
Yeah. I just launched a website for my art that is philipbell.art. And it's not totally responsive yet, and I haven't proofread it yet. It's kind of like just a like flow of mind with images. But it is something that people can look at to get some more context and like some more like information about the art that I'm making. And then like my Twitter handle, like I do check that like at least once a day. So you can message me on Twitter and I'll very likely see it there.
Great. And we'll include all those links inside the show notes. So
Cool.
thank you for sharing that. Well, Philip, it's been so great getting to know about you and your background, and then also about your project and, what your thoughts are about, the future of yourself as an artist. So I appreciate you talking to us today.
Thank you so much, Panyo. It's been great talking to you.
Likewise. Just for everyone tuning in, After Dinnerman's discussions are available as a podcast. We're going to be pumping these out weekly. You can find all of the conversations on Spotify, Apple, Google, and Amazon. Finally, we have a newsletter that gets sent out weekly with information on upcoming drops and generative art related news. You can find a link to the newsletter in the description of this video. Again, I want to thank Phillip for being on the show today and talking to us about the project, and for joining me on After Dinnerments.
Thanks everyone for tuning in.
For everyone else, make sure you comment, like, and subscribe to the Art Blocks YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode of our weekly show. Be kind to each other, buy what you love, and we will see you all next week. Thanks, Phillip.
Thanks, Panyo.